Okay, so I've got test. Have you also?
Test. Okay.
So let
If
me,
one if one robs his father and swears to him and he dies, he pays the principal and a fifth to his sons or to his brothers. But if he does not wish to, or if he does not have, he may borrow, and the creditors come and receive their payment.
okay, so it's important for us to understand what's this mechanism over here. So he has a guy who stole, and now he swore falsely that he didn't have, and he stole from his father. So now and his father dies, and now it's going to come out of the Yerusha. Now he's a Yoresh, but he can't get his kapara until he's paid the money back to somebody.
Right.
That money really should have gone to his father, which would have come back to him by Yerusha. And now he doesn't want to lose that because technically, if he'd paid his father back while his father was alive, the money would have just come back to him by Yerusha anyway. So he can do a little bit of a harama over here. What he can do is he can borrow money, and he can borrow money and pay back with that, and the creditors can come and take out of the Yerusha so that he doesn't actually lose. It actually comes out a little bit clearer when you take a look at the next Mishnah.
If one says to his son, Konam, if you benefit from what is mine and he dies, he inherits him. But if he said it should apply during his lifetime and after his death and he dies, he does not inherit him, and he must return it to his sons or to his brothers. If he does not have any, he may borrow, and the creditors come and receive payment.
Okay. So now this over here, we learned in Nadarim. In fact, we just learned it if you've been doing your Chazara in Nadarim.
Right.
We just learned yesterday that somebody who's Muda Hana is nonetheless allowed to excuse us.
Hello.
Hello.
Bye-bye.
I missed you playing guitar the other night.
Yeah.
You did. Shame on you.
I
So somebody who's Muda Hana is nonetheless allowed to have his debt paid off by the person that he's not. Right, so that's not considered a Hana. That's considered removal of an obstacle because he's got creditors on his back. So now all that you've done is taken away the creditors. So he has a case where the son has an Issa Hana from his father, but he wants to get the Yerusha somehow. So what he can do is he can borrow from other creditors, and the creditors come and take from the Yerusha because what's happening now is that the Yerusha is now helping to pay back his loans rather than benefiting him directly. So it's all kind of funny money, and it's a bit of trickery, but the fact is that in this way he can actually get a piece of the Yerusha, which he would not otherwise been able to have. And the reason why that works is because Yerusha happens automatically. It's just that the money from the Yerusha is also to him by force of neder.
Right.
So it actually is his money. He just can't do anything with it.
No.
But what he can do is he can borrow, and then the money that's fallen to him from Yerusha can be used to pay back his creditors, because that's not considered hana.
Right. Okay, I got that. Okay. If one robs a proselyte and swears to him and he dies, he pays the principal and a fifth to the Kohanim and a guilt offering to the altar, as it is said. But if the man has no kinsmen to whom to return the restitution for the guilt which is returned to Hashem goes to the Kohen, besides the ram of the atonements which he shall atone for him. If he was bringing up the money and the guilt offering and he died, the money shall be given to his sons, and the guilt offering shall graze until it develops a blemish. Then it's sold, and the money is placed in the denoted of the native offering.
So here is where now this Mishnah is an important groundwork for today's Mishnayos, which is talking about a ger who had money stolen from him or borrowed, and then he died, and now it has to be repaid to whom? Because he swore falsely, he in order to get a kapara he has to return the money, but the ger doesn't have any yorshim to whom to give the money. So there, the kohanim who are currently on duty take the place of the ger. So he pays it back to the kohanim who are on duty, and then he gives his asham, and he's got his kapara. Okay, so that's the important thing. That's the important thing that we learned from this mission. Now, carrying on into the next Mishnah. Yud base nasan is a kesef l'anshe mishmar. So now, if he gave the money to the people on the mishmar, and then he died, that is the person who was trying to pay back. So now he didn't have time to give his asham, which means that okay, so he didn't have the opportunity to finish up his kapara. So now his yorshim, we saw in the previous Mishnah that if he died before on his way to the mikdash, then the yorshim, then his yorshim will just take the money back because money that's due to a ger, whoever grabs it first, the ger is dead. He doesn't have any yorshim, so it's hefker. So whoever gets it first gets it. So now the yorshim grab it. They don't need a kapara. They weren't the ones who swore falsely, so they don't need to give anything to the temple, and they don't need to give an asham. But here in this case, where he's already given the money over to the kohanim, even though he didn't finish his kapara, the money, the yorshim can't come and claim, oh wait, he didn't finish his kapara, give us back the money. Because the pasuk says once it's been given over to the kohanim, it's a done deal. There's no, yeah. Okay. Nasana kesef li yohora yariv v'asham li yadaya. Now, what happens if he's spanning two different watches? Okay, and the first one is Yehor Yariv, and the second one is the Yadaya. So if he does it in the right order, and he first gave the money to the first shift of kohanim, and the asham he gave to the second shift of kohanim, that's okay, because
so he came in the middle of the shifts changing.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Right. Or he did it one day apart.
Okay.
Which is also possible that he gave the money one day and said, "Oh, this asham is parcel. Let me go and get another one." And by the time he comes back, it's past Shkia, whatever. Now you got to come back the next day, and it's the next shift of kohanim. That's okay, because the important thing is the first thing he's got to do is get rid of the gezel. He's got to get rid of the avon of pay. He's got to pay back the money. Only then can he start doing his asham, which is like Yom Kippur. You know, if you want to appease your friend, you first got to appease him, and then you can come to Hashem and ask for forgiveness. You can't ask Hashem for forgiveness before you've appeased your friend. So yeah, he's got to give the money before he can get his kapara. Okay, what happens if he did the other way? Asham liyahayari v'kesav liyadaya. Okay, so he gave them the asham first. Im kayam ha'asham. If the asham is still alive, yakrivuhu b'nei yadaya. Then fine, let b'nei the yadaya sacrifice that. V'im lo yachzor v'yavi asham acher. He didn't get a kapara from the first asham. It was worthless because he hadn't paid the money yet. So now he's got to come back and bring another asham. Shamevi gazelo ad shelo hevi ashamo yatsa hevi ashama ad shelo hevi gazela lo yatsa. Because the right thing to do is to return what's stolen before you bring the asham. If you bring the asham before you've returned what's stolen, you're not yatsa. Nasan lo is a keren, v'lo nasan es hachomesh. If he paid back the principal but not the added fifth, ein hachomesh ma'akev. Okay, the chomesh is not ma'akev. He could bring that even after the asham. So the important part is the principal, and if obviously you should pay them both at the same time. But if you neglected to say, oh wait, I need to pay chomesh as well, then let him pay that after the asham. That's also okay. Hagozel umachil es banav. If somebody stole and used the stolen property to feed his children, v'heniach lifneihem, and v'heniach lifneihem, or sheniach es hagozel lebanav, or either. It's a different case. They're two different cases. One is he gave them to eat. The other one is he just put it in front of them, and they ate after their father died. Since the gezel is not still extant, it's gone. It's been sold, whatever. And so now the yorshim who ate from the gezel are pater. They're not the ones who have to repay. They just ate something that they didn't realize was stolen. They weren't stealing it themselves. So they say, "Oh, we're really sorry that our father stole this, but sorry, we can't return it to you." Okay, they don't have to pay the value. Okay. Okay. And all that's happened is that there's that the father has a debt because he has to repay something that he stole. So that must come out of the Yerusha, but there's no lien on any property. It's just metaltalin. So if there's anything, so they will have to repay out of the Yerusha, but they don't. But there's no. But somebody else who's got a lien on property will be able to grab the property first before the creditor, before the one who was stolen from.
We're talking about children here. We're talking about cottons, or we're talking about someone who's 12 and a half.
We're choosing children over here because they're Yorshim. Because their father died and now he's left all of his property, and we say, okay, but we didn't know that it was stolen food we were eating. They ate it. They don't have to pay it back if there's nothing left in the Yerusha.
But the Yerusha is can be any age at that point. I mean,
of course, yes.
So he's 4 or 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old.
Doesn't matter. You could be 70 years old and your 90-year-old father died. That's.
But what I mean is, how do they know that they have to pay this back? How do they know?
Because later the Nigzal comes with witnesses and says your father stole that food from me.
Okay.
And they say, oh my gosh, that's terrible. I feel awful. We've eaten the stolen food.
So it's not.
I'm really sorry about that, but we don't have any money. There's nothing left in the Yerusha, and there's no debt. There's no chov on them. The only chov is what's left in the Yerusha, not on their personal property.
So it doesn't have to be done immediately. It can be done 5 years later if they're 2 years old. Right. Okay, yeah. That's what I was questioning.
No, there's no statute of limitations.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Now, what happens if the father stole something that has achrayos? So, for example, landed property or slaves, or those are typical things where there is achrayos and there's a okay, and he sold those chayavin l'shalim. Now that they are chayav to pay because their father's property was already meshubed when he was alive. Okay. The Gemara explains that this Mishna is talking about where the Yorshim ate what was the value of what was stolen after the Baalim had Yeush. They'd already given up on getting it back. But if they ate it before Yeush, before the Baalim had given up, then they still do have to repay. It was only if everything that we said in the beginning where they don't have to repay is if they ate after Yeush. You remember what Yeush is when they're given up.
Right.
Okay. However, if the gazela is still in their hands, if it's still existing and it's in its original form, they have to give it back. Okay. Right, because Pasha, this is exactly the item that was stolen, and they have to return it.
Right.
So even if there was Yush, they have to give it back because it's still the same item. Okay, let's move on. And partim lo mitebas hamochsim. Now, here we're dealing with some people who are presumed to be thieves. Okay, the mochsin is somebody collects meches but unauthorized. You have people who are authorized tax collectors, and they are legit, and you have to pay them, and everything that they have is legitimate. What we're talking about, the mochsin, is basically a local bandit who's bullying the people into paying up protection. You've got a mafia. Okay, so the mochsin is basically a local mafioso. Okay. So now you can't go up to that mafioso and say, "Listen, can you give me change for 10 shekels?" So even if he's coming to you and saying, "You owe me 5 shekels," and I say, "Well, I've only got a 10 shekel. Can you give me 5?" Because the money that's in his teva is considered stolen. So now you're taking a 5 shekel piece that's stolen.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Velomi kis shel gamayin, and also from the kis shel gavaim. So that is gove hamas. There was a mochsin. It's a similar case. The Gemara is explaining that this is talking about a moches who doesn't have a limit. There are two different cases of people who are extorting money from people. But it's the same principle that they're taking money shalom tzedek, and we assume that the money that's in their box, in the collection box, is stolen. But ain't not in mehem tzedakah, and you cannot accept money for tzedakah from them, so that they shouldn't feel like they're getting some sort of kapara by, oh, we stole this money, but we're giving to tzedakah, so it's okay. Aval not elhu mitoch beis or min hashuk, but you can go to their houses. Because that's their private dealings. That's not the stuff that they've been robbing from people, by going around town or in the shuk. If you've got, even if the moches has been going and buying stuff in the shuk, you don't have to worry now that this money is all tainted in the shuk. It's once it's moved into circulation, it's no longer got the taint of theft on it, and you're allowed to do business with people who've done business with the moches. Okay, Mishna base. Natlu mochsin es chamoro v'nasenu lo chamor acher. So the mafioso comes to him and says, "That's a nice donkey you got there. Hand it over." He says, "What am I going to ride?" He says, "I got to get home." He says, we've got another donkey for you. Here, this feeble donkey over here. You can take this one. We'll keep the nice one. Okay. So now the Yid wants to know, well, can I keep this donkey? Because the Mistama, they stole this donkey from somebody else. Gazlu listim es kasusa v'nasnu lo kasus acheres. They stole his nice clothes and gave him some rubbish clothes just so he doesn't have to walk back naked. Hare elu shelo. He can keep the he can keep them. It's fine. He can keep them. The owners have given up on them. Okay, so now what's different between this Mishnah and the previous Mishnah where he said you can't take the money from his chest? Why don't we say the Baalim have already given up on the money that's in there? Well, we'll see in just a minute. If somebody rescues something from a river or from a whole bunch of soldiers who are going through the town, or from bandits, if the owners have given up, which they typically have, if there's been a flood in the river, or if the soldiers are storming through town, you basically give up on your possessions and run. So if somebody saves something from them, he can keep it because the Baalim have already given up.
Right.
Okay. Hold on. So, let's see. So what? So right. So I thought it was going to be explicit in the Mishnah, but it's actually not. It was a commentary. So what's the difference between this and the previous Mishnah? Why is there Yerush from these mochsin but not from the previous ones? And the difference is that we're talking about whether it's Jews or non-Jews. If the robbers are non-Jews, then we do not assume Yerush, because the non-Jewish courts are a lot easier to work with in terms of getting you back your stolen property. They give back on circumstantial evidence. They give back on they're a lot less demanding on the burden of proof to take money away from somebody. So therefore, if a non-Jew steals money and then he's not misyayish, because he can take them to the non-Jewish house and say, "Give me back the money that you stole," and he's got a chance of getting it back. But with the Jewish courts, it's a lot more difficult because you've got to have the witnesses and you've got to have a proof and all the tiners and whatever. It's very difficult in Jewish courts to extract the money. So therefore there is Yush. Okay, back into our Mishnah. Now, what happens if you've got you're a beekeeper and you've got a whole hive of bees, and the queen flies out and takes a whole bunch of bees with her, and flies away. So now the next door neighbor sees these bees and they've landed on his tree. He says, "I'm also a beekeeper. Let me grab these bees and put on my protective gear, get the queen, and put her into my hive." If the Baalim gave up on it already, then he's allowed to keep him. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka, Ne'emenes isha o katan lomar mikan yatsa nechil zeh. He says that normally we don't accept testimony from a woman or a child, but we do believe them when they say, "Oh, that swarm of bees, it came from your uncle's bee farm over there. We saw it coming out." So they actually believed on that particular point. Says Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha. And if a person sees that his swarm of bees has flown into his neighbor's property, he's allowed to walk into his neighbor's field in order to retrieve his bees. And if he causes damage, okay, so then he will retroactively pay what he damaged. But he may not break the branch of his neighbor's tree, even if he says, I'll pay him back for the branch for the damage that I'm doing, just so I can get my bees back. Okay. Rabbi Yishmael beno shel Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, Av kotzetz v'nosen es adamim. He says even lechatchila he's allowed to break the branch in order to retrieve his bees. However, that is not the halacha. You cannot deliberately do nezek b'yadayim in order to save your own thing. You need the permission of your neighbor to break the branch of his tree if you want to bring back your bees. Okay.
Yeah. Remember, we had this with the simon. If someone loses something, once he despairs of it, and someone else picks it up, unless there's I think there's even a name or a sign, some kind of simon on it that shows that it's his. That he can...
Right. So the whole thing of Yush is we have the only way you know somebody has a Yush is if you heard them saying, "Oh, I've lost it, it's gone." Then you say, "Oh, great, that's Yush." But we also have a presumption of Yush for things like money. If you find money on the street, we have a principle that people are continually checking their pockets. So whoever lost that money has already realized the money is gone, and they know that there's no siman on money. So therefore, you pick up the money, it's yours. There's no need and honestly no benefit to say, "I found money, come and claim it from me," because how are you going to give a siman? How do you know the person didn't just guess and say, "Oh, I lost 200 shekels"? Okay, it's yours. Okay, giving the denomination of the money doesn't help.
Right.
Unless you say it was an envelope, containing 3,225 shekels. Okay, that's a good siman. It's in an envelope, but there wouldn't be yush.
Right.
Okay.
So five. Okay, let's go. Zion Bay. If according to two witnesses a person stole, and according to them or according to two others he slaughtered or sold, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment. If one stole and sold on the Sabbath, stole and sold for the idolatry, stole and slaughtered on Yom Kippur, stole from his father and slaughtered or sold it, and then his father died, or stole and slaughtered and then consecrated it, he pays the four or fivefold payment. If one sold and slaughtered for medicinal purposes for dogs, for one slaughters and it is found to have an organic defect, or if one slaughters an ordinary animal in the temple courtyard, he pays the fourfold or fivefold payment, and Reb Shimon exempts him in these two instances. If according to two witnesses a person stole, and according to them he slaughtered or sold, and they are found to be false witnesses, they pay in full. If according to two witnesses he stole, and according to two others he slaughtered or sold, and both of them were found to be false witnesses, the first one pays the twofold payment, the second one pays the threefold payment. If the second ones were found to be false witnesses and he pays the twofold payment and they paid the threefold payment, and if one of the second ones is found to be false, the second testimony is void. If one of the first ones is found to be false, the entire testimony is void. For if there is no theft, there is no slaughter, and there is no sale. According to two witnesses, one stole, and according to one witness, or by his owner's confession, he slaughtered or sold and pays the twofold payment, but he does not pay the fourfold or fivefold payment. If one stole and slaughtered on the Sabbath, sold and slaughtered for idolatry from his father, and his father died, and afterwards he slaughtered or sold, stole and consecrated, and afterwards slaughtered or sold, he pays the twofold payment, but he does not pay the four or fivefold payment. Reb Shimon says for consecrated animals for which he is responsible, he pays a fourfold or fivefold payment, and for those for which he is not responsible, he is exempt. Okay. Kedushin. Okay. Aleph Bet. A Jewish bondman is acquired with money or with a document and acquires himself with years or with yovel or with deduction of money. A Jewish bondwoman has the advantage over him that she acquires herself with signs. One whose ear is bored is acquired by the act of boring and acquires himself with yovel or with the death of his master. A Canaanite slave is acquired with money, with a document, or with an act of possession, and with a document through others, as long as the money is from others. A large animal is acquired by Metzira, and a small one by being lifted. These are the words of Rebbe Meir and Rebbe Eliezer. The sages, however, say a small animal is acquired by Mishika. Okay. Possessions which have a lien on them are acquired.
That's it.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Nedarim.
Okay. We have Dalit Hey.
I've got Dalad. Let me just check.
Dalit.
Let me check on. I'm just checking on the schedule. Nedarim. Yeah, Dalad.
Okay. If someone was prohibited by a neder to benefit from another, and the latter entered to visit him, he may stand but not sit. He may afford him a healing of his person, but not a healing of his property. He may bathe with him in a large pool, but not in a small one. He may sleep with him on the same bed. Rabbi Yehuda says in the summer, but not in the winter, for then it benefits him. But he may recline with him on the bed. He may eat with him on the same table, but not from the same plate. However, he may eat with him from a plate which goes back to the host. He may not eat with him from the worker's bowl, and he may not work with him on the same row. These are the words of Reb Meir, and the Kamma, however, say he may work far from him. Someone prohibited by a neder made prior to Shemitah to benefit from another may not enter his field and may not eat for hanging fruit. However, if the neder was made in Shemitah, he may not enter his field, or he may eat from this overhanging fruit. If prior to Shemitah he made a neder prohibiting food-related benefits, he may enter the field but may not eat the fruits. But if he made the neder in Shemitah, he may enter the field and eat. If someone prohibited by a neder to benefit from another shall not lend him, nor shall he borrow from him. He shall not lend him money, nor shall he borrow money from him. He shall not sell to him, nor shall he buy from him. He said to him, "Lend me your cow." He responded, "It is not available." He said, "Go on my field with respect to ever plowing it with it." If it was his practice to plow, he's forbidden. But if other people are permitted, if it is not his practice to plow, he and all other people are prohibited. I wonder what's the difference between prohibited and forbidden. Same thing. Change the words into.
I don't know. Subtle.
Yeah. All right, we have Yud Gimel. We may replace a dressing in the temple, but not in the provinces. If for the first time it is prohibited here and there. We may tie a string in the temple, but not in the provinces, for as the first time it is prohibited here and there. We may cut off a wart in the temple, but not in the provinces. If within an instrument, it is prohibited here and there. A Kohen who injured his fingers may wrap wheat grass over it in the temple, but not in the provinces. And if he's forced out blood, he's prohibited here and there. We may spread salt on the ramp so that they should not slip. And if we may draw water from the exile's will and from the great well with a windlass on the Sabbath and from the flowing well to Yom Tov. If a sheretz was found in the temple, a Kohen may remove it with his sash, but as not to prolong the presence of the tumah contamination. These are the words of Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha, and Rabbi Judah says, with wooden tongs so as not to increase the contamination. From where do we remove it? From the temple, the antechamber, and between the antechamber and the altar. These are the words of Rabbi Shimon and Nanis. Rabbi Akiva says the area for which one occurs karas is for an intentional transgression or a sin offering for an unintentional transgression. From there we must remove it, but all other areas we cover with a pot. Rabbi Shimon says, wherever the sages have granted a dispensation, they have been given you what is yours, but they have not permitted except that which is a rabbinical decree.
Hadron Allah Maseches Erevin. And we're starting Pesachim just in time as we finish Sukkot.
Okay. Not today, though. Okay, tomorrow. Okay, so we have Nida, and we are in Hey Vav. A girl who's 11 and 1 day old, her vows are examined. A girl who is 12 years old and 1 day, her vows stand. And a girl's vows are examined her entire 12th year. A boy who was 12 and 1 day old, his vows are examined. And a boy who was 13 and 1 day old, his vows stand. And a boy's vows are examined his entire 13th year. Before this time, even if they say, we know unto whom we vowed, or we know unto whom we consecrated, their vows are not valid vows, and the consecrations are not valid consecrations. After this time, even if they say, we do not know unto whom we vowed, or we do not know unto whom we consecrated, their vows are valid vows, and the consecrations are valid consecrations. The sages created a metaphor for developmental stages of a woman: a green fig, a small fig, and a semel. At the stage when she is likened to a green fig, she is still a child. The stage of a small fig alludes to the days of a naras period. During both the stage and that stage, her father is entitled to her fines and to her earnings and to the another annulment of her vows. Semel alludes to a stage of full adulthood. Once she reaches full adulthood, her father no longer has authority over her. What are her sons? Rabbi Yossi Hagili says from where a crease forms under the breast. Rabbi Akiva says from when the breast hangs down. And Azai says from when the areola darkens. Rabbi Yossi says from when the breast is large enough that he shall put his hand on the nipple and it sinks in and delays returning to its original position. In the case of a 20,
That's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
What did you say we were doing after this? I just forgot.
After everything, we said Psachim.
Pesachim, that's right. What a mind.
Okay, but chorus.
Bekor, Stali Gimel. If one slaughters a Bekor and then shows its blemish, Rabbi Yehuda permits it. Rabbi Meir, however, says since it was slaughtered without the sanction of an expert, it is forbidden. If one who is not an expert inspected a Bekor and it was slaughtered by his sanction, it must be buried and it must make restitution from his property. If one derived a verdict and he declared the guilty party innocent, or he declared the innocent party guilty, or he declared something tameh which was in fact tahor, or if he declared something tahor which was in fact tameh, what has he done is done, and he must make restitution from his own property. But if he was an expert approved by the courts, he is exempt from making restitution. It happened that a cow's womb had been removed, and Reb Tarfon had fed to the dogs, and the case came before the Kamma, who declared it permissible. Todos, the physician, said not a cow or a sow leaves Alexandria until its womb is cut away in order that it should not give birth. Said Reb Tarfon, your donkey has departed. Tarfon, Reb Akiva said to him, Reb Tarfon, you are exempt, for you are an expert approved by the court, and any expert approved by the court is exempt from making restitution. If one takes payment for inspecting Bekoros, we do not slaughter them by his sanction unless he is an expert like Ayela at Yavna, whom the sages permitted to take 4 isses for small livestock and 6 isses for large livestock, whether unblemished or blemished.
Adkan.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Tomorrow we're in the same matzav as today, maybe even more in terms of time.
Well, it's Simchas Torah.
Yeah, right. So I don't think we'll get to. I don't know.
We're not going to have a share tomorrow.
Okay.